10,000 Dawns. Chapter 21. The Burden of Solitude. What the hell is this? Atlantis base. I just covered that. Keep up. No, you're on Titan, with dogs that should have died literally centuries ago. How? How do you know they're the same dogs? Heinrich chimed in. They're the same dogs, June and Graylin said in unison, which seemed to piss both of them off slightly. The dogs both had a distinctive mark on their left flank. It's there. Heinrich hadn't been looking, but yes, there was. Some letter of the Cyrillic alphabet. Is it really surprising they're the same dogs? I mean, you know what's going on here, don't you? I clearly don't, Miss Scythes, so I'd appreciate if you'd stop talking down to me. Graylin looked disappointed and ran her hand along her tightly ponytailed hair, her pin glinting off the bright lights. Oh well. She made a sort of dismissive gesture to no one in particular. It's pretty obvious we're not from here, though, at least. I'm sorry you didn't figure out we were from the future. What? Heinrich said. The future. You know, that time that's not now, but yet. I know what the future is. Are you sure? Regardless, you got here just in time. She turned abruptly and started walking down the silver, gray, and green hallway. In time for what? We're going to be facing away from the solar system in a moment, and since it's the year 2227, it should happen again. Stop teasing us. What? We should encounter another extrasolar object, only not like any you've seen before. Follow me. They obliged. What else could they do? And take off those bulky things. This place is airtight with the best fake gravity money can buy. You just look ridiculous. She pushed her glasses up under the bridge of her nose and kept walking. The man called Archimedes sighed and squatted down to pet one of the dogs. Sorry about that. She's usually pretty snippy when people can't keep up with her. June nodded and followed Graylin down the hallway. She and Heinrich removing their helmets and gloves as they went. The facility varied between being gray-silver and green or gray-silver and blue depending on the area they passed through, though neither June nor Heinrich could particularly figure out why. Graylin kept her eyes forward, with a supreme aura of confidence that moved beyond self-esteem and into superiority. Parts of the place looked as though they had been ransacked, with knocked-over tables and chairs, smashed computers, and broken mugs and glassware every which way. The walls were sometimes stained with what looked horribly like brown, dried blood. Graylin kept walking till she arrived at an open room with a big table in the middle displaying a very high-quality hologram of Titan and the space surrounding it. Floating next to it in the air was a timer that appeared to be ticking down. The rest of the room was aligned with scientific equipment of all varieties, some recognizable, a seismograph, microscopes, flasks, and Bunsen burners, and some that were utterly foreign, a strange device that appeared to be a floating silvery orb that shifted into geometric shapes, while a panel under the floating orb displayed a seemingly random number with every shift. But the purpose of the room was fairly obvious. It was a lab and command center in one. It was also fairly messy, but in a way that the room looks when someone's a clean freak, but hasn't had the time to clean up properly, but still forced an effort at it. You want an explanation to what's going on? I'll give you one. Aren't you curious who we are? Graylin shook her head to June's question. Not in the slightest. I know who you are because I knew you were going to arrive here. I'm from the future, remember? You meet me and write all about it, though dare I say you kind of left out some of the awkward bits. She waved her hand and pulled up a model of their ship. If I'm correct, you have a Wendy model AI on board? June nodded. That's right. Could you patch her through to your suit's speakers? I know she's already listening in. Heinrich was surprised June followed the request without question. He really didn't understand what June was doing. She clearly didn't trust either of these people, but seemed to be willing to go along with them. Archimedes finally entered, carrying a dog under either arm, in an unintentionally condescending show of strength. Wendy's voice then crackled in. Hello. Wendy, welcome to Triton. Thank you, Miss Scythes. Now, Wendy, you should find the list of codes to jack into this building's mainframe in the folder labeled F22 on your G drive, correct? That's How is that correct? Log in. This will make things easier. Graylin waved her hand for the hologram and it shifted again, the colored light shimmering on her cat pin. The hologram showed a team of people in a clothing style that clearly hadn't been created yet. Graylin was there, though she looked younger and more optimistic. This is the team who worked on Project Atlantis. Officially, we're attempting to build underwater cities in the deep ocean. Unofficially, we were attempting to use the natural high pressure of the deep ocean on Earth to facilitate experiments by our CEO, John Arrow. He had a theory that there had been experiments in an alternate reality by another version of himself to create and manipulate tears in the fabric of reality in order to travel to or remove things from alternate realities. June grimaced. I'd say that's impossible, but you're here. Well, we're from an alternate reality, so clearly it can happen. We've managed to get into your reality, just in the wrong time, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Arch set the dogs down, and they walked over to the table and lay down in front of it. Graylin didn't pay particular attention. Unfortunately, as it turned out, not only was the experiment on our end not ready, but neither was the one being worked on the other universe, which, by the way, did exist and Errol was totally right about. Also, we weren't the first people to try hopping realities, and there seemed to be a sort of inter-reality travel regulation group. An image appeared of a man in black robes wearing a ring with an arc emblem on it, or maybe it was just a sideways C. They didn't react kindly to our jaunting around, and the experiment went even worse than anticipated. We've been wandering around alternate realities for a while now before ending up in your time stream and, well, getting stuck there too. But this time is different, because, in a way, I've always known I'd need you, June. I've been waiting a long time. Graylin pulled off her cat pin, holding it up to the light. And Heinrich noticed the obvious thing he'd been missing all this time. It was the same cat pin June was wearing, and the same one in the hologram. That isn't right, though. You're not supposed to have the pin, are you? Am I? Sorry, it's very hard to get the timing on these things right. June paced around the table, stepping over the sleeping dog. This has been all ready for so long, all these coincidences, all waiting for this year and this place for both of us to be here. Graylin nodded. I'm afraid on that matter you know more than I do. I only know what was told to me. Heinrich looked between the two women. They were staring each other down. Okay, you two are clearly in cahoots somehow, and I went in. You're keeping stuff from me. You've been keeping stuff from me this whole time, apparently, June, and I'm done with it. Tell me what on earth is going on. June sighed. Heinrich, this isn't the first time I've seen Graylin. You've met before? No, she's met me. I've never met her before, Graylin clarified. But you knew you were going to meet her. Graylin nodded again. God, okay, so time travel is possible. Second question. The space has been here a long time. If the dogs have survived, so how have you survived? Graylin ran her hand over her hair again and closed her eyes. She looked like she was listening to a sound only she could hear. Because for Arch and I, we've only been here a few days, and this base isn't always here. It comes and goes. Arch spoke again. Yeah, basically this building has been here now for a few days. A really long time ago, a few days in the 1970s, and it's been here for a few days now. That also isn't possible, Heinrich muttered. You'll see exactly how possible it is very soon. I'm afraid with your arrival, it means the 22227 cycle we're on is about to reach the point where it's gonna happen. Heinrich crossed his arms. What's going to happen? Graylin lowered her spectacles on her nose. She looked him right in the eyes. She leaned in slightly. The light of the hologram cut into her face, so her eye and cheek swirled with the seas of Neptune. What's going to happen, she began, is first contact. There are some things, you can say, that people instantly know the power of, statements that hold a weight beyond the seeming face of their characters. These are things with implications, bold statements that open a profound weight beyond the echo of their waves or the flow of their ink. This was not only one of those statements, but it was one to which there was no way to immediately respond. The words took up the next few minutes, although there wasn't anything else said. Anything Heinrich could think of saying didn't seem appropriate, like slathering jam on a rock. As time ticked on, though, the importance of the weight whittled, till he could finally espouse something, even if it was totally unbefitting of the weight of it all. So, aliens. Well, yes. Well, sort of. More like a probe. I can't tell you much about the future, but I can tell you that this won't be the last contact with extrasolar beings we have. Of course, no one knows about this in the future. It's all locked away in the files of Hiram J. Whitehead's The Pilgrimage Group, who you'll be reporting back to. But what we do here is still going to be important, and it's going to influence the future in huge ways. And you knew about this, June? She shook her head. I didn't know all of it. She looked at the hologram. So what do we have to do? Keep your spacesuits on. I'll be getting mine in a second. Arch is fine as he is. They met Arch and Graylin at the airlock. She looked kind of awkward in a spacesuit, the way people who weren't used to space do, bumping into corners and expecting their reflexes to be faster. Arch looked just as imposing as always. I'm still not sure of a lot of this. They haven't explained everything well, like why the building disappears and reappears as they claim it does. I know, and the only way we're going to learn is if we stick by them. I've been waiting a long time for this. Be patient. We'll get our answers. Wendy piped into their comms. Hello. Hi, I'm sensing some really weird things from space. You've almost rotated into a full dark side position from Neptune. I checked. You're on the equator, so you'll be on the furthest point of the farthest place in our solar system, whatever that means. Thank you, Wendy. Keep monitoring everything. We need someone who can analyze all the data we're getting. I'm on the job. Great. Graylin pushed the button to open the airlock, and the four of them stepped in, leaving the two dogs whimpering behind them. The airlock shut, decompressed, and opened up into what was both the darkest and most brilliantly colored sky they had ever seen. With the light from the sun absent, it was darker than you can imagine, but the stars were bountiful in a way that they had never seen. It wasn't that much farther out as the scale of the universe goes, but it was enough. Above them, a cathedral ceiling of light lit their path. The dust they kicked up, incense, the arbitrary point they walked towards their labyrinthian center. Wendy said the readings were increasing, and as the moon turned, the darkness and lights grew more and more, till where they stood was it, the farthest place and the furthest, and they knew it was somehow. In their bones and in their blood they felt so distant and so put away from anything they had known. It was then, in that distance, that the sky opened up in a tear of fantastic blue and white, literally. For a moment they felt it wash over them. They felt that there was something wrong with reality, that it was wounded. And from that wound shot out a silvery white ball, rocketing downward like a meteor. It should have impacted the moon and tore up the ground, sending the humans flying like bowling pins or crushed them under dirt, rock, and ice. But instead, it stopped 1.23 meters off the ground and hovered there for a moment. Its skin was silvery blue and crystalline, with white and faint black designs on it. The ball began moving, slowly this way and that way, always maintaining its height of 1.23 meters. Any noises it made were intransmissible in the near vacuum. The ball was, according to the measurements Wendy took from the visual data, also 1.23 meters in diameter, and according to the same visuals was moving in the shape of an asterisk. It moved out in one direction and back in towards its center landing point. It did this over and over again, while the 4 or 5, depending on who you count as living, watched it. Should we attempt to communicate with it? Heinrich asked. June shook her head. How on earth... How could we? Graylin was focused on it, with a fixed stare. Is it from the Council incursion? Archimedes asked. Graylin nodded. It's some sort of probe. A scout. Council incursion? Heinrich didn't take his eyes off the orb. It's in the future, don't worry about it. You mean there are more of these things? No, there are its creators. That's why this is important. This is the first shot, and whatever we do here is going to reverberate through history. A lot of histories, actually. Maybe we'll capture it and gain a technical edge. Maybe it will report back on us and they'll have plenty of tactical data in order to begin their assaults. Maybe it will just explode or something. I don't know. But what I do know is it's up to us right at this moment to decide that with our actions. The ball stopped moving in an asterisk. This isn't your first time seeing something like this, then. Tell us what to do. Graylin tried to ignore the clammy feeling she had as the bead of sweat rolled down her face, and the suit's automatic systems blasted cold air there and began to absorb the moisture. The ball suddenly and silently dropped to the ground. Huh, she muttered. First step. Let's start running, Archimedes said. I don't see why, Arch. It hasn't. 4 legs popped out of the orb, right where some of the patterns on the shell had been. Its sharp feet pierced the icy ground as it barreled towards them. Oh dear. Run! Move! 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 Why is it running with legs when it could float? Don't question the alien robot's motivations, Gray. Wendy, we might need a pickup or something. No, we need to trap it. It wants to learn from us. We have to stop. She tripped on a rock, and just as swiftly was pulled back up by Archimedes' large hand. Stop it from leaving here, and we're the best bait there is. Back to the base! They ran from it at breakneck speed, bounding and leaping in the low gravity. The orb seemed like it should have caught up with him, and June looked at Graylin across the dark plain with a look of indignation. Graylin looked back. Maybe her curiosity got the better of her. Maybe, despite her cool demeanor, she was as terrified as she should have been. Whatever the reason, her head turned, and her attention lifted off the ground and floated to the charging orb kicking up moon dust. That was when she tripped the second time. It wasn't a graceful trip, like you'd see in the cinema. She didn't fall straight toward the dirt with a stunned expression on her face, arms ready for the fall. Her ankle spun around more than it should have, and in the low gravity she not only fell but corkscrewed. As she spun, her face came into view every other moment, which gave her the effect of a cheap animation. As her face became more and more shocked with every rotation, she hit the ground head first and bounced. A hand reached out above her and gently kept her from floating off. Instead, she hovered there, face down, sinking slowly. The other hand attached to the person stabilizing her reached out the other direction, towards the charging orb. It stopped inches away from him. A single leg lifted up and seemed to gently poke him in the chest. It wasn't so innocuous for very long, as from under the curved forepart of the leg, silvery white tendrils that looked wound like rope slithered out and began feeling around his chest. Archimedes tensed. It was him. Of course it was. June and Heinrich grabbed Graylin and slid her into a standing position. The orb and Arch stared off, or something like staring each other off. If there had been sound, it probably would have been humming in an ominous, pulsing way. But it was inappropriately silent instead. June pulled on Graylin's hand, but she remained rooted in place, her eyes fixed on Archimedes. Arch, she whimpered. She never whimpered. Gray, just hold still. You'll be okay, she said firmly, as though her resolve had never been shaken in her life. June took a hold of Graylin's shoulder and shook her head. How are you sure? Trust me. I have your pin, right? Graylin looked back at Arch. The tendrils were wrapping around his chest. They're trying to get inside my carapace, Gray. Damn it. She tried to wipe her brow instinctively, but there was a helmet in between. Cut it! Cut the probes! What if it sets it off and it goes berserk? Arch, we'll deal with that. Get free! We need to get back to the building. I'm not leaving Arch. I told him to get in front of it. I'll hold it off, Graylin. Go! I'm not leaving you! Heinrich, grab her. June and Heinrich took Graylin by the arms and pulled her back. She tensed at first, letting them pull her with light resistance as Arch became enveloped by the cables. Then something clicked inside her like a watch mechanism, and she turned with them, and moved as quickly as she could, hiding the wince in her breath as her twisted ankle hit the ground. Wendy, we need a pickup, now! June basically yelled it into her comlink. Not the base, not the base, she told Heinrich. Graylin tried not to look back at Arch. She had never been the greatest partner to him, and she knew that. Her concern was generally beyond people, beyond things. If there was a clock, she could try to work out the things inside it by how it moved and sounded. She visualized the insides of people, too, made guesses about what was going on inside them by any outer clues she could get. Where some people undressed people with her eyes, she skinned them. Today, though, she could imagine the cords wrapping around him, squeezing his outer shell till the squishy bits inside burst. This image, though, wasn't fascinating. It made her stomach churn. Graelyn tried to push back everything she'd been told as a child.